The Great Resignation. Why are so many people quitting their jobs? The U.S. will open up borders with our neighbors next month, and William Shatner gets his chance to go to space. Wednesday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Wednesday, October 13th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hi, Carlo.
Happy hump day, Jill. How you feeling today? Are you fully better?
I am, but because I get up so early, I feel like this is just lingering.
Yeah, I know
My
what you mean.
husband said to me,
really...
he said to me, he's like, I think you just need a day to sleep. I'm like, fine, I feel better, but I don't know.
I feel you. Well, before we get started, I want to just mention one thing yesterday, because we got some emails. I got some Twitter DMs on this, and usually the Jill rule of thumb is that if a couple of people write in, that usually means there's a lot more where they come from, right? But
yes.
So a few people were upset that we were talking about John Gruden yesterday. He was, of course, the former head coach of the Raiders who hit the bigotry trifecta with his racist, homophobic, and misogynistic emails that cost him his job. A couple of people were just writing that they were upset that I used the words that he used when talking about that story. Also, we wrote them full out in the newsletter. So
I just wanted from the newsletter.
Yeah, a couple people. So I think people are saying like those words are offensive. They shouldn't be used in any context. And my argument, is I just don't. I don't agree with that. I think when you're talking about something in which those words are directly relevant to the topic at hand, the news item at hand, as it was in this case, that we do a disservice to our readers, or in this case our listeners, by like blanking them out. Right? We could have beeped it. You know what I mean? But we didn't, and I don't think that that's our responsibility. I understand that those words are offensive, and it's probably not the first thing you want to hear in the morning when you listen to us. But I stand by my decision to say that, and hopefully that sort of clears things up.
Okay, thank you. I noticed it because, one of the points that somebody made was that we always say the N-word. We would never say what that word is. And then I saw your response to that was, well, everyone knows when you say the N-word, you know what that is. It's not like it needs clarification.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, the N-word is a different. I actually would even argue, if we were going to get into like a journalism debate about this, that, saying something like the N-word or the F-word or the C-word, actually all that does is it shifts the onus on the listener, right? Because then the listener has to think in their head, what is this person actually talking about? And then they have to say that word in their head. Does that make sense?
Right, like if you said, because we said, I guess I don't know how to say it, the F word and the P word yesterday, and that both of those words, I kind of did a double take because you said them and I did a little bit of a double take, but I thought to myself, the reason you probably said it was because if I said the F word, do you know what that means? I don't know. Or
right,
the P
exactly.
word.
And it just softens it softens the story. I mean, this guy said those words, right? And that's what cost him his job. And I think that, we're all adults enough to be able to, to deal with that.
Okay. Carlo, thank you for clarifying.
It's an interesting debate. I think it's sort of fascinating.
I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think we're in this very new time, and it's tough. And people are also listening to us, and are not watching us. And I tend to feel like things when you're listening, it's just so much more pointed.
Totally, yeah. It's much more like intimate, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway.
Okay, let's get to some news here. A record 4.3 million Americans quit their jobs in August, according to new Labor Department data. About 4 million people have been quitting their jobs every month since spring. It's a trend that is being called the Great Resignation. Nearly a quarter of those who quit their jobs in August worked in the hospitality industry. But this is not just restaurant and hotel workers that are putting in their notice. A recent Harris poll found that half of working Americans are looking to make career changes because of the pandemic, with the majority saying that they are in search of more flexible jobs.
This is I find this talk about fascinating to just be a really interesting thing that's happening all around us right now. This data also does a little bit in helping to explain why the last couple of jobs reports have been so disappointing, right? That we have a record number of open jobs, but hiring is either flat or down, depending on what industry you're talking about. And, there's just a lot of churn out there, right? You see it wherever you go. I mean, I'd say I have probably 4 or 5 of my close friends who have quit their jobs in the last 18 months, not just to take some other like lateral position in the same industry, but to do something completely different or to go part-time. So I suspect there's a lot of other people who are having that same experience. But I think it goes back to this question, right? Is what's happening right now, is it a labor shortage? Is it a wage shortage? Or is it something else entirely, right? I think that what you're really seeing is this shifting of leverage that's coinciding with kind of this changing of priorities because of what happened over the last going on 2 years now, right? If you're under 50 years old, this is really the first time in your career that you've had real leverage in the job market. And I think that's good for society, right? It's also good for people's well-being, and I think it's also a change to this sort of American-specific pathology that the only way that you can find fulfillment in your life is through what you do, is through work, right? Is through sort of working for the man and taking home a paycheck. Becky always talks about how she comes from Eastern Europe. And she always used to talk to me about how when she came here, she was always so surprised that when she met people like out at a bar or at work or whatever, or not at work, but like at a bar or a restaurant, the first thing that they would ask her is, "Oh, what do you do?" And she always thought that was so surprising because where she comes from in Romania, that isn't something that you would ask somebody when you're first meeting them. You would ask them like, "Oh, who's your family? Where do you live? Like, what do you like to do in your free time?" They wouldn't ask about their job. I always just thought that was interesting because it's so here, like if you're out at a bar and you're meeting somebody, like the first question you're going to ask them is, "Oh, what kind of work do you do?"
To the point, right? Carlo, where as you were saying that, I'm thinking, well, what else do people ask? Which is so lame. I can't even believe I couldn't come up with any other question. Right. And in fact,
exactly.
Someone asked me a couple months ago, they're like, "What do you do in your for fun or in your spare time?" And I actually was thinking, I don't know. I don't know. I watch Netflix. I mean, it was so pathetic. It was this real moment in my life. And I'm busy. Totally. I'm a working mom. I don't have that much free time. But I was like, what do I do? I don't have hobbies. I don't knit. I don't do anything. We don't travel anymore. What?
I totally hear you. I've been in that same position. It does sort of feel a little bit pathetic, right? But I think that the bottom line here, right, the shock of COVID, it just put a lot of things into stark relief for a lot of people. And I think this sort of goes back to this work from home debate that we've been having for months now. There's this big trade-off happening, right? I find, and as you and I have discussed, I think that our podcast, I think that the work that I do is better in the office. I think that there's something to the idea of being in the office with your colleagues and working things out in person rather than over Slack. But my quality of life is absolutely better when I can work from home, right? I mean, I can help out with the baby. I take the baby off of Becky's hands every morning for an hour just so she can have a shower. That's not something that I would be able to do if I was at the office. You're having this real shift in people's priorities between work and the work-life balance, I guess, right?
No, it's funny because and I don't want to stay on this too long, but I listened to your podcast I read the document. So you didn't actually say this, but you just wrote it. I apologize. But you said, Baker was off on Monday and so was, and I was off as well. And you're like, I guess I'm the only, chump working on, the holiday or whatever. And I was laughing, but I was thinking to myself, well, if I could work from home, I wouldn't have needed the day off. I actually could have just I wouldn't have spent 3 hours in the car. I would have been able to. I have breaks in my day where I would have be home instead of sitting in this office, staring at paint dry. So I actually would have been able to. I wouldn't have needed the day. Like if I was able to work from home, I would not have needed to take the day off on Monday. I needed help because my daughter was off from school.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, but anyway, a really fascinating debate. This change in what we're thinking about. I find it fascinating, and I think I agree with you that I think that this is really good for Americans and just for I would hope for all of our mental health.
So yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, the White House is expected to announce today that it's going to reopen the land borders with Mexico and Canada next month, allowing non-essential travel between the U.S. and its neighbors for the first time in 19 months, but only for fully vaccinated travelers. The easing of the land border restrictions will coincide with the reopening of air travel to foreigners, meaning that the country will more or less be fully open for business come November.
God, it's about time. It's crazy when you think about how we're still basically not letting people in, even given that the COVID situation is getting better and the widespread uptake of vaccines. And just on the vaccine front, I wanted to mention this. Maybe I'm the only person who cares because it's happening in my hometown. But the Brooklyn Nets have given an ultimatum to Kyrie Irving. He's one of the league's best players and one of its more notable vaccine holdouts.
For the record, your hometown is like whatever town you grew up in, Westchester. Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
A story in Brooklyn about the Nets is not a local to Carlo story. But continue.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, I just wanted to make a point of this because the Nets said that Irving is not going to be allowed to play or practice with the team unless he complies with New York City's vaccine mandate. They were basically considering letting him just play for the away games. So they're showing some backbone there, and I personally like to see that. Michael Jordan, by the way, he came out this week and he said he was a, quote, firm believer in science. So, if he were Kyrie Irving's teammate, you better believe that Irving would have been vaccinated by now. But all of this is just to say, Jill, we got some feedback over the last few days just about people being like, why are we still talking about this, right? Vaccines are available if you want them. If you don't want them, that's your own choice. I've heard this argument going around that it's the same people who are pro-choice when it comes to abortion and against the government deciding what they can do with their bodies. Those are the same people who are arguing for vaccine mandates. I find that to be a very disingenuous argument. And I think that what we forget is that this is a public health emergency, right? COVID is a highly infectious disease. Your decision doesn't just affect you. If this disease didn't spread via aerosol, then we wouldn't have to be talking about any of this stuff, right?
Right, and if you didn't look, the fact of the matter is these hospitals are overwhelmed. I mean, how many hospitals in this country have had to delay elective surgery? I mean, it's not an individual issue. It's just not.
I agree, and I think that that's one thing that's really getting missed in all of this is this. I mean, this country has a real, thing obviously about personal freedom, and that's great. I mean, that's one of our founding principles. But it's not this it's not just this thing that's set in stone, right? We live in a society here, people. We got to help each other out.
I was just laughing, though, because at the top when you were like, I can't believe we're still talking about this, I read this really funny tweet yesterday. I was just starting to look for it, and I cannot find it, so I'm just going to paraphrase. It was something like, it's October 2021, but it's really March 2020. And it's so
right.
True. It's we're just still living in an extended March 2020. Still.
It feels that way sometimes, right?
A significant turnaround on some conventional wisdom when it comes to heart disease. People 60 and over should no longer take daily low-dose aspirin to prevent a first heart attack or stroke, according to a government-backed panel of experts. The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force has revised its past recommendation, now saying that whatever benefit aspirin serves in preventing cardiovascular events in otherwise heart-healthy older people, it's actually outweighed by the risk of internal bleeding, which increases with age.
Yeah, this is a big one. Tens of millions of people take baby aspirin to prevent heart disease. I'm pretty sure my parents, or at least my father, is one of them.
I think my parents are included there.
Yeah, and I think heart disease, of course, is still the leading cause of death in America, even with COVID, even with overdoses, even with suicide. So this is a fairly significant turnaround here. And and I'm not an expert in this by any stretch, but it always did seem a little bit odd for this blanket recommendation to take a blood thinner as a preventative measure, right? I mean, I think when this stuff, it always comes down to the same thing, right? Talk to your doctor. Do what your doctor tells you.
Okay, and I don't want to go on a whole tangent here, and I'm sure everyone who's listening is going to roll their eyes, but what stuck out at me from this was just how the science has changed even after all this time, because in terms of COVID and the protocols and the recommendations, I feel like the changes are what is creating a lot of frustration and creating a lot of skepticism. But I think that this is evidence that this happens, right? So look, I still do not understand from Dr. Fauci that first quote-unquote noble lie about masking, where he was saying the masks don't really help. And we later learned that it was really this fear that Americans were going to just go out and buy up quality
Right.
face masks when we knew that the medical professionals didn't really need them. So that's in a lot of circles right now. That is being called the noble lie because the intention was really good. But it did.
It was like the original sin.
But it did erode some of the trust that some people have in him. Okay. Other than that, though, I think things change. Science changes, right? With COVID, we're seeing it play out, I think, in hyper speed. And one example, I took my daughter to the pediatrician this weekend because she has this cough that just will not go away. It's fine. It's just, it needs to run its course. But it turns out, by the way, same pediatrician who I used to go to when I was a kid. Okay. So, and my husband too, we go to the same pediatrician. Maybe we need to like get a life and move or something.
Actually.
But we go to the, we see the same pediatricians who saw us as a kid for my daughter. Anyway, so I asked him about this over-the-counter cough medicine that I used to take all the time as a kid. And I don't know. And he said, we don't recommend that anymore. The American Pediatrics Association does not recommend that anymore. He had various reasons for it. But I didn't think like, oh, I'm never going to this pediatrician again. He poisoned me when I was a kid. No, like things change. The science changes. That's just kind of how it goes.
Right. And it's our understanding of the science that changes, really, right? Exactly.
And look, you have more data, whatever. Anyway, let's switch gears here. The International Monetary Fund says it's growing less optimistic about the global economy's ability to grow in the short term because of supply chain disruptions, inflation, and the persistent threat of COVID. The central bank also warning about the possibility of sudden and steep declines in the stock and housing markets as the Fed prepares to start unwinding or tapering the support that it's been giving to financial markets since the start of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that we're going to get a legitimate market shakeout by the end of the year. And again, I say that without really knowing what I'm talking about, just kind of a gut feeling. And don't take investment advice from me, but I would not put money into the market right now. It just seems like we're due for a correction. Does it not?
Because I thought this. I remember working on the floor of the exchange when the Dow was at 18,000, and it's now at like 10,000. I don't even know what it is. I think it's 20. What is it? 20s, whatever. And I remember thinking like, oh, no, there's going to be a correction. And I mean, it has been years. I think this is one of the longest bull runs in history.
Yeah. You're right. So, I mean, who knows? I just think that when the Fed starts to come out and say they're going to start tapering, that's going to be a bad sign for equities at least. But you're still seeing all of these issues. It sort of goes back to what we were talking about with the labor shortage, right? Apple came out yesterday, said they're cutting the production target for the new iPhone because of this chip shortage that won't go away. You've got this truck driver shortage that we've talked about, which is really what's behind all of these bottlenecks at the ports that are now starting to really threaten Christmas, right? The ability to get things on the shelf for Christmas. I mean, this holiday season, Jill, is going to be an absolute nightmare. I mean, between these shortages, seriously, between the shortages and the way that people are acting like, feral animals out in public, I think that anybody with a customer-facing job over the next couple months, all I'll say is like my prayers are with you, right? This is going to be like the Lexus December to Remember apocalypse or like the Build-A-Bear bloodbath of 2021. People they're not going to get their stuff and they're going to lose their minds.
Look, well, the big news about that Apple and the iPhone, the reason that's so incredibly important, well, there's two things here. The one is for a company like Apple, but for many of these companies, are people going to delay purchases or are they just not going to make the purchases? So if you were going to get a new Apple iPhone, are you going to wait the 6 months or whatever it was going to be to get that phone, or are you just going to say, you know what? I'll wait till the next model.
For the next one.
I mean, at this point, even some of these Christmas and even some of these holiday shopping lists, right? Like, if something's not there, if you can't get a toy, I don't know. Maybe you just if 6 months later your kid may not even want it. You might just not. Yeah. You might just say, forget it. I'm not going to get it. So that's the question in terms of what kind of impact it's going to have on the economy. The other thing to think about, too, is that Apple has one of the best supply chains in the world. I mean, if there's any company that should be foolproof here, it's Apple. Right. So the fact that they are not immune to the chip shortage does not bode well for basically any other retailer.
Yeah, I think actually I just saw this come across the wire here. Biden's going to make some announcement today about keeping the port of Los Angeles open 24/7 to try and get some of these bottlenecks under control. And I have to say, politically, this is something that he has been way out to lunch on. I mean, this is something that is really affecting people, these supply chain issues. And he has got to show that even if there's not that much that he can personally do, the Democrats have to show that, they're in charge of the government. Like, this is something that they have to start to try and figure out how to fix, or at least appear to look like they're trying to fix.
And by the way, the Dow, it's at about 34,000 right now. Okay.
So if you took Jill's advice at 18,000.
And I apologize for not knowing exactly where it is, because I follow it every day, and I very often just look at the percentage change.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you missed that bigger number. So I hope you guys don't think differently of me here. Okay. Captain Kirk is going into space this morning. For real, a Blue Origin New Shepard rocket scheduled to lift off from Texas at around 10 a.m. Eastern time, carrying 90-year-old William Shatner and 3 other crew members for this 11-minute up and down trip to suborbital space. It's going to be Blue Origin's second human space flight, coming 3 months after it successfully carried founder Jeff Bezos on his inaugural mission. Cool.
It was this should be cool. Shatner, by the way, has been talking to the media and just been talking about how he's terrified about doing this, which begs the question of why he is. But no, it should be cool. A cool opportunity for him, and a good piece of PR for Blue Origin, which needs it right now. There was a pretty big Washington Post investigation into Blue Origin's quote-unquote toxic workplace culture this week. I actually haven't read it yet, so I don't want to opine. But it's just, I say that it's notable because the Washington Post, of course, also owned by Jeff Bezos. And on this trip today, along with Shatner, just the other crew members, if you're wondering, it's a Blue Origin executive and then 2 tech founders. Those 2 guys are actually paying for their seats, but it's unclear what they're paying.
Okay, so I did read that article, and it is some of the accusations. You'd think this was like like from Mad Men. I mean, that era, in terms of just the culture of what's going on. One thing that really struck me, though, about all of this new reporting that's come out is there's a lot of safety concerns. There are engineers at the company, at Blue Origin, who have said they would not go up on this Shepard rocket.
Yeah.
And that is just wild, because they said it was just by luck that the first one went off without a hitch. That was the one with Jeff Bezos and his brother.
Yeah.
And Wally Funk. I mean, that was like the first, can you imagine if something had happened? There was something culturally going on. It's very reminiscent to me, because I followed the Boeing 737 MAX story really closely. And that similarly, engineers had flagged and said that they would not they would not go on that plane, that they would not fly their own family on a 737 MAX, and yet it had been flying around, and we know, unfortunately, what happened. We have hundreds of people dead because of it.
Right.
This is life or death. So when you have a culture that does not, so you have like the bro culture, that's one part of it, but when you also have this culture that doesn't allow for people to say, hey, there's a problem here, or hey, we need to fix this, in a situation where you're sending people to space, that is not a good situation.
That's also way more interesting to me. Like, I would have led with that instead of like the toxic workplace culture, like the bro-y stuff. I mean, I don't know. That to me is just less newsy than the idea of there's actually engineers at this company who are saying that they wouldn't put their own family in that rocket, right?
It's pretty wild. All right, we almost have to leave, so that means it's time for more to know before you go. The coroner in the Gabby Petito case announced that Petito died by strangulation and was left, quote, outside in the wilderness for 3 to 4 weeks before her body was discovered on September 19th.
Awful. The FDA approving the sale of a vaping product yesterday for the first time ever. This authorization applies only to the Vuse Solo brand e-cigarette and its tobacco-flavored nicotine cartridges. That thing is made by the tobacco giant R.J. Reynolds. The agency said that the benefits in helping cigarette smokers quit, at least with this particular product, outweigh the risk of hooking kids.
The music distributor United Masters is giving artists the opportunity to get paid in cryptocurrency through a new partnership with Coinbase. This is a first for the music industry and a real boost for crypto as a means of conducting regular business, though of course it comes with risks for artists. We could do a whole show, I think, on crypto, Carlo.
Yeah, I would have to learn a lot more. It's still something I don't really feel like I understand. On the entertainment beat here, as expected, Squid Game, now the biggest show in Netflix history. The streamer says that the show has attracted 111 million viewers globally. That's about half of all Netflix accounts that have tuned into this thing. Incredible. Of course, you got to take the usual disclaimers when you're talking about anything Netflix related, because they're a little bit unclear what they count as a view. But nevertheless, this thing just an absolute monster.
The House approved a measure to raise the debt limit until December, sending that bill to the president for his signature. As Democrats continue to fight over the scope of President Biden's economic agenda, Pelosi once again saying she wants that social spending bill voted on by the end of the month. We have about 2 weeks left.
Yep. And finally, Houston and Atlanta have both advanced to the next round of the Major League Baseball playoffs. The Astros just steamrolled the White Sox last night to punch their ticket to a rematch of that 2018 ALCS against the Red Sox. Over in the National League, the Braves top the Brewers to advance to the NLCS. They will meet either the Dodgers or the Giants. Those rivals play do-or-die Game 5 in what's been an incredible series. That game tomorrow.
All right, everybody, that is what you need to know for Wednesday, October 13th.
Have a good one, guys.